What is up, my little Dados? Vepsis here, bringing you guys the WBE Singles Division weekly recap for the week 3 this time around, and we are gonna be going through also my power rankings at the very end. But first and foremost, I do want to apologize that I'm a little bit late on this, but I was quite busy throughout the end of the week, so I didn't have the time to get this one off for you guys. But hopefully you're still here and you're gonna be enjoying this one as we're gonna be going through this. So let's further ado, jump into the first battle from this week. And as the first battle for us to cover from this week will be between Nijmegen Nuzleafs, coached by Automatic, going up against Pittsburgh Pitchers, coached by Nexus. And this started off in a way that both sides were really trying to predict each other what they were trying to do. Especially Nexus seemed to have a really good hand when to U-turn with his Rillaboom and get his Steelix in for free, and Automatic took a notice on that, and he tried to eliminate the Steelix very early on, and he didn't feel comfortable in that position to having to be around the Steelix like that, and it forced him eventually to a play that he found himself valuable, that he gets rid of the Steelix in the sake of weakening down his Arcanine. But to me, from my point of view, I view it as like a misplay, because to me the Arcanine's main purpose is there for V-Ball. So if you let the V-Ball counter to get weakened down by something that it's not supposed to be dealing with, to me that wasn't really the ideal situation, especially early on the battle when you already have seen Stealth Rocks and you have seen Toxic from the Steelix. I would think it always has to have a crown coverage to hit the Ace Slash, and then I think it's the highest likely scenario that it has to have a steel move to hit the Weezing. Surely it could have had a rock move, but I think it's more likely to have something to hit the Weezing that it was necessary for a rock on it, especially when he had the Toxic on it. So that's where I think the Automatic's play of staying in wasn't the most ideal, and something that going into our rock on it would have been more ideal, knowing that it was a rest talk setting, had a liquidation obviously on it to hit it hard enough, and there was a better chance in my point of view that it didn't have rock move to hit it. But then we get into position, speaking of the Araku on it, it's there to dedicate it check to the Keldeo, which was a very awkward save from my point of view to see from Nexus side, because it was Subcalm Mind dual stab, where to me it should have been Choice Specs versus Automatic. Like Automatic would have not had a switching to a Choice Specs Keldeo. The best thing he could have had for it was the Araquanid, but if he was modest like he brought for this game and Choice Specs, Air Slash was pretty much 2-hit KOing that thing. So to me that was a misprep from Nexus's side to bring that set, and it wasn't efficient at all for him at all, and we saw it from there. And then we get to the position that there is a really big misplay from Nexus's side, which to me kind of threw away the game completely. Like Arcanine play from Automatic was the one that I liked the least what he did, but the one that Nexus did to me decide the whole game eventually from there, which was that he allowed the V-Wall stay in versus the Arcanine and did not check the role that it would be with Knocko versus the Arcanine. To me, he should have always swapped out. He knew that the Arcanine was a timer. It was a very good chance it's gonna be trying to hit you with a flamethrower. So on a better case scenario, you should always swap it out, not risking a roll which was a 6% even on his like it's only a 6% chance for him to kill him. He didn't know this, but in a hindsight we know this to be the case. So to me, staying in with Viva and risking it when it was heavy duty boots and sticky webs were up, that was a big misplay from Nexus, and in the end that was the more that I thought that if there's one way for you to win this, considering the scenarios and the sticky webs being up, it was that Vival. And then at the very end there were a couple of scenarios where Automatic let the Mudsdale go down versus the Heliolisk, and he came in onto the grassy terrain to get the crash knotted by it. To me that was kind of like not a game designing mistake, but it cost Automatic a little bit differential and a luxury to deal with the Heliolisk at the late game, because in the end Heliolisk put a good amount of pressure, and it was probably the Nexus's best mode after V-Wall, seeing the scenarios that how things were playing out. And Nexus's final mistake, which kinda sealed the deal for me, at least for Automatic. I think Automatic would have still won the game if he made the proper plays, but the end game of sacking Gardevoir just to get up a wish for the Rillaboom, that was no worth for Nexus at all. I think at that point you should have gone into the Heliolisk, killed the Araquanid, and then forced a play for Automatic that he had to get right, because if he went into Ace Slash, Nexus had a chance to win. If Automatic would have gone into Starmie, get the damage so the Ace Slash could beat it, then it's a different story. Then Automatic still had an out to win that battle, but I think Nexus kind of just gave it away for Automatic by just letting go the carnivore like that just for the Rillaboom, and it didn't clearly pay off for him. But yeah, that is the first battle from the week 3, and now let's go and see how the second battle went. And as the second battle for us to cover from this week will be between San Diego Team Arts coached by Envy going up against Starchas coached by Fenatax. And this was quite of a massacre game, as you can tell from the result, and really good showcase from Envy, but Fenatax did not make himself any favors with his preparation and the plays that he made. He made just a couple of mistakes, but they were very crucial versus Envy's Dragapult, which we got to see that got 5 kills out of this battle. But now let's go through how it kind of basically happened and what allowed it to come in place. So Envy made a proper scouting play turn 1, seeing and recognizing that the Kyurem was the second one swapping out versus his Dragapult, meaning that he was able to tell Dragapult outspeeds it now naturally like it should be, and therefore the Kyurem could not beat Choice Scar, which was one of the biggest things that he had to fear with that thing. And to me, honestly, that was something that Fenatax should have done through his preparation instead of the set that he brought. And then the second thing that it really comes into a misplay from Fenatax's side was where his Gophokrigus did not have Colbo Berry on it. He had a Kasi Berry instead for Dragapult, but he should have had Colbo Berry to deal with the Guts Flame of Obstacle, which was a huge threat to him early on and putting a lot of pressure to Fenatax's side, and Fenatax did not have anything on his team that could swap into it, and Gophokrigus surprisingly enough could have done that thanks to the Mummy ability and get rid of the Guts on the second attempt from there. So to me, that was quite of a misplay from his side. And then the big misplays comes with Fenatax letting his Hatrini weaken down further along through versus the Togekiss, first swapping in it at the first attempt and then be able to preserve it, but the second time he swaps it again on another hit and then lets it go down on a third hit from Togekiss. And this was perfectly fine for Envy. This was actually just what he needed to open the door for Dragapult to be able to click Dragon Darts for free, because now there was nothing that was able to resist a Adamant Choice banded Dragon Darts, and that really was rough from Fenatax from there, because finally he made a very minor mistake, meaning Fenatax, with allowing Snorlax take just a tiny bit of chip with his Snorlax swapping into Lantern's hit. And from there, basically what it meant that it was always 2-hit KO by the Dragon Dance, and it didn't help the cause that he also then tried to preserve the Kyurem versus the Dragapult, and from all things he swaps his Snorlax, which is the only thing that can live it from fall from a Dragapult or from the Dragon Dance, and then he allowed it to get 2-hit KO from there. And then it wasn't pretty to watch, everything falling down to the Dragapult in itself. He did have Luxarroot Dusk with X-Play Belt and Sucker Punch on it, but that should have not mattered if he went for it unless he got a critical hit, because the Dragapult was always able to live that, and that was crucial thing that Envy was able to preserve it at full health thanks to the fact that Fenatax didn't really play around it properly. And that's pretty much the whole game in itself, very short and sweet as a summary, but that's pretty much how the battle was. And now let's go see how the third battle went. And as the third battle from this week will be between New York Trippies coached by PokeAMD going up against Bullet Punch Club coached by Uchikanu, and this was a very hectic game in a sense that Uchikanu, for what I helped him and gave him marks, he had a very clear game plan that he was executing, which was a hyper offensive dual screams game plan, which started off with him leading out with the Copperazza, getting up his Stealth Rocks, and luckily enough for him, the Dragosaur that he was facing in front of it wasn't a standard ball peak set from the Dragosaur, which meant that it was able to lift the hit from Flamethrower into a Thunderbolt, which ultimately killed it. But Uchikanu got his rocks up, which was very key for himself. But then, as he brings his Dragon in, he made a very minor mistake regards to predicting Joey preserving the Dragosaur, then goes for the Earth Power, where instead he should have gone for the Dragon Pulse, cause that would have enabled him to keep the Hapa Berry intact for the Noivern that it was originally intended there for. So very minor mistake from Uchikanu part, and then he starts to execute really his game plan with those dual screens, and he gets his Espeon in versus the Sylveon. But he made a mistake in a sense that he failed to realize that the Sylveon was choice specs and it was locked into Mystical Fire, which meant that once he got his screens up, he could have gone into his Passimian knowing that it was locked into that and gotten a free Defiant boost from that, cause the Mystical Fire would have lowered the special attack stat and therefore giving the Passimian +2 attack basically for free going from there. But that's not necessarily like a big mistake, it's just a missed opportunity for Uzikano that he could have utilized to provide more pressure. And then, a few turns later, we got to the point that he was, Uzikano was letting his Espion go down versus a Noivern, just so he could get the Rotom hit for free versus the Noivern, because the Noivern ran for the Draco Meteor in order to kill the Espion. And now that being at -2, he could get up his screens once more. And these were therefore be able to allow the Scolopid go for the game. And everything seemed to go like Uzikane wanted with the Scolopid. He wanted to set up versus the Sylveon. He had the weakness policy intact on it behind the screens. So whatever would come in like a Gigalith going for a Rock Blast, as long as it doesn't get like max rolls or something like that, it can pop up its weakness policy and clean out the rest of the team from there. But that's not how it happened. As we see on the screen, it gets critted through the screens from a Hyper Voice from a Choice Spec Sylveon, and that stole from Uzikaner a potential way to really go for a win, and it would have really come down to those Rock Blast rolls coming from the Gigalith. And we kind of got stolen, including Uzikane got stolen from his chance to win, but from our fans' perspective, we got stolen away from a very close end game, and it could have gone either way from there. But Joey PokeMD is able to, I guess, escape from a potential loss with a 3-0 win thanks to that crit. I think Joey played it somewhat fine, to be honest. Not really many mistakes besides potentially allowing the Passimian getting the Defiant, or failed to see that what Uzikane was trying to do with the Scolopid, but he was fortunate enough to get the critical hit, and gives him undefeated, whereas Uzikane has to move on from this, and I believe that he will bounce back from this. But now, let's go and see how the 4th battle went. And as the 4th battle from this week will be between Destroyed Steel Winds coached by Seabat going up against Milwaukee Suspicious coached by Steve, and yet again another 1-0 game in this season, which is really crazy to see so many of these. And this started out well for Steve, leading on with his Drapion, getting up T-Spikes turn 1 as he forced out Seabat's Torpedo, and getting those up early when Gengar didn't show up to the matchup, which was Seabat's grounded Poison type, was really nice for Steve, because now everything that is grounded should be affected by them unless they have heavy duty boots on them, or if Seabat manages to defog them away. But the Scammer is not going to be a defog set, it reveals to be substitute body press set, which was a really interesting set, and he's able to put some pressure on Steve how to manage and get around it, and he does manage to get a critical hit on a Manectric, weakening it a lot quicker than it should be able to do. But Steve is able to gain his momentum back, force the Skarmory out, and goes for the Volt Switch. And then with the Whimsicott coming in and getting affected by the T-Spice critically, he's able to get his Drapion in. And here, Seabat makes a couple of really wild predictions, which Steve unfortunately doesn't get them right. But I understand why he didn't get them right, because I didn't agree what Seabat did, where he first stayed in with his Whimsicott, risking it all with that thing just to get a Moonblast damage off on it. And then on the following turn, we get to see that he does swap out and goes into the Skarmory on the turn that Steve thinks that, oh, he's just giving the Whimsicott, so I go for the P-Jab. But it was a very wild prediction from Seabat's side in itself. But then we get to the point that Steve really makes his first mistake of this battle, which is that he fails to realize the opportunity to go into his rear nucleus as the Skarmory did come in on his Drapion, and to me, this was a potential setup opportunity for the rear nucleus, cause Seabat doesn't have a dark type on his draft, and now that the T-Spikes were up, it had a very good opportunity to try to beat Seabat's team from there. The only way that it could have been prevented was Skarmory having Taunt or Phasing move, or the Whimsicott has to come in and go for the Encore. But even then, at least he will know if they have those, and Whimsicott's case, it's going to be always getting weakened by the Toxic Spikes as a whole, and getting weakened down from there. So it was a minor missed opportunity from Steve from there. And then Steve managed to finally get around Discovery once more while it was in the field with his Komodo, and he's able to pressure it to the point that Seabat decides to stay in and let go Discovery just to get a brave bird damage, which I can understand from Seabat's side. You have to get damage and respect the fact that Komodo could be setting up, so you don't want to give it a free turn from there. And then Steve makes another mistake that seems small right now, but these are critical turns for him. What I saw that he didn't get right that are going to cost him in the end. And that is where that Whimsicott was in front of his Ferrothorn, and he does go for straight up for the Gyro Ball to kill the Whimsicott. But the Whimsicott, as it goes for the D4, which Steve was seeing coming, he didn't realize the fact that he could have spammed Stealth Rocks versus that Whimsicott until the Whimsicott dies to them, and he would keep the Stealth Rocks up, which are critical, very critical for the Cloister sitting in the back, especially since the Whimsicott has proven to be at that point to be the only remover, and it would be gone and the rocks would be up from there. So keeping that in mind, we get to see a situation where the Trapeon does swap in on a Kudra when Kudra is able to force out the Ferrothorn that it was out formerly versus a Whimsicott, but now the Kudra does go for the fire move. Steve does properly swap out into his Trapeon and he lives the hit. This is a critical turn for Steve because this is another opportunity where he can get the T-Spikes up, but he doesn't do that. He opted to go for the damage, weaken the Kudra just so the Barraskewda can kill it, which I can understand to extent that why he did that, but the issue with that is that now he doesn't have any kind of hazards up, where ideally he would be able to now have on this particular time of the battle both Stealth Rocks and T-Spikes up. Which means he's a lot safer from the Cloister and more playing to the point that the dual dance Rhinoculus in the back with Acid Armor and Calm Mind and Store Power can really clean up the game once he gets it in. But him not having these hazards up, we get to the point that Komodo and Barraskewda together are managed to able to get rid of the Orbital, which is nice for Rhinoculus if he finds the turn to set up. But before we get to the point, eventually we find ourselves in a situation where Steve does bring his Ferrothorn in after he killed the Orbital with the flip turn, so he has to bring the Mon out first, and his mindset is that he wants to bring the Terrakion in from Seabat's side and kill it thanks to his Chopo Berry, including Gyro Ball, to kill the Terrakion as it would be going for the close combat. But now the issue comes here where Steve kind of failed to realize is that he really needed that Ferrothorn healthy for this Cloister. That's the only thing preventing Cloister to sweep him. But he allows the thing play out as he thought that he originally wanted to see happen, which is that the Ferrothorn kills the Terrakion and the Cloister is the last thing alive. But now the Cloister comes in, goes for the Cell Smash, and little Steve did realize until it was too late, it was all over for him. After being up 4-1, he loses this in 1-0 fashion. Yet again painfully for Steve. I know he has had these rough losses, and to me, this is again like more so that actually I liked his prep for the most part completely how he brought it for this game. But this is where he has to learn for seeing the end game for himself and what he needs to do to win and not lose to a certain thing in the back and how he can prevent that to happening. And this was a good example and a learning curve for Steve from there. But good on Seabat, he executed the game plan. He kind of did the reverse thing that happened to him because he got swept last week and lost a very comfortable situation into a 1-0 game to Fin Attacks, and now he turned the table versus Steve. So very hectic and fun battle to watch if you haven't seen it yet. And now let's go and see how the 5th battle went. And as the 5th battle for us to cover from this week will be between Dundee Dealers coached by Callum going up against Super Light People Outs coached by James WBE. And this started out pretty well for Callum, where he made a turn 1 really good scouting play versus the Roto was. And from there, with the Serena going for the U-turn, he's able to position himself well with the Vikavolt, and then later on with his Cobalion to able to get it in on a turn when Umbreon goes for the foreplay. And this allows himself to get into +1 attack, but then he makes a misplay with his Cobalion, which you're gonna see this happening 2 times from my point of view, where he misplays his Cobalion, where he doesn't go for the Sword Dance when he should have, because when he would get the Sword Dance up, he could actually guarantee 2-hit KO the Corviknight. Whereas in the 2 instances, the first one where he goes for the raw close combat, it doesn't take him anywhere, and on the second time around, when he goes for the rocks first, it doesn't really put himself in a better position going for those rocks first, because the Corvi Knight went for the defog anyways, and then he went for the sword dance. If he just went for the sword dance always this first time with his Cobalion when it came versus the Umbreon, he would have been such a good offensive position and always claimed the kill on that turn with the Cobalion in itself. And then from there, we get to see how James W. Big has to reveal the Choice Scout Rotom and confirm it in the battle, because he used that to revenge kill the weakened Cobalion once he killed the Umbreon in itself. And from there, it starts to go into James W. Big's favor, because this is where Callum kind of starts to throw slowly but surely the game away into James W. Big's favor, because how he mismanaged the Conkeldurr that he's dealing with. First time around, he doesn't stay in with his Serena for whatever reason when he got the dropkick attack off on the Conkeldurr, which meant that Conkeldurr was -1 attack. And then he goes into the Crimsnall, and Crimsnall in itself wasn't attacking the Conkeldurr in front of him, and the damage that he could have gotten out of the Speed Break is very crucial when we see later on Cinderace going for the Pyro Ball versus the Conkeldurr in itself, because that would have meant that it was always a lot easier revenge killable for Callum to take care of the Conkeldurr from there. But instead he went for the U-turn, and he had to give up on his Crimsnall the way he managed it from there, and this puts him in eventually in a position that he actually ends up misclicking with his Serena on the second time around when he brings it out versus the Conkeldurr. This was really painful to watch from Callum's side, because you knew if after the yet again when he got the drop kick off on the Conkeldurr, and if he got to click that synthesis up, he could have 1v1 the Conkeldurr, and the Rotom was at the late game with this Serena, but instead he clicked the Aromatherapy, he loses his Serena from there, and then he loses to Conkeldurr by slimmer amount of health what it was able to always hang on into, and that is where the earlier plays with Crimsnall not attacking when it was in front of it really cost him, besides the fact that he ultimately made that misclick, which really gave the James W. Big his narrow 1-0 win from this week, which is crazy that we got to see another 1-0 game this time around. Good game from James W. Big. I think he is progressing the battle steadily, got better and better as it went along, whereas Callum's kind of went downhill from there, where he had a very good start, but then he didn't take advantage of the early lead that he had because the misplays versus the Conkeldurr. But that is going to be the 5th battle from this week, and now let's go see how the 6th battle went. And as the 6th battle for us to cover from this week will be between Battle Rock Battle Freeze coached by That's +1 going up against Wakanda Vivas coached by Moet. And they started out with Moet leading up with his Marini, getting up T-Spikes versus opponent that did not have a grounded poison type in his draft, so very solid choice for Moet's behalf. Whereas That's +1 leads out with his Focus Sash Zoroark, which was disguised as Mimikyu and goes for the Sword Dance turn 1. This meant that the Zoroark goes for the Encore turn 2, locks the Marini to Toxic Spikes at that point, and this actually would have confirmed more if he knew this for a fact, that it wasn't Mimikyu anymore, because Mimikyu cannot learn Encore, whereas the Zoroark can learn this. But either way, without him knowing for a fact, I believe through his live commentary, he had a good hunch that it would be the Zoroark and swap into his Vullaby, which had 4 play on it. It was max defense as well and max HP, so it's able to deal with the Zoroark from there, even it being the Focus Sash and able to 2-hit KO it, but it does leave the Vullaby in a range that the Hurricane from Butterfree on the following turn after the Zoroark went down is able to finish off the Vullaby, and all of a sudden, after just few turns, we are sitting at 5 and 5 position. After this, we're gonna be seeing that the Duraludon comes in versus the Butterfree and does go for the Rock Slide and flinches it, which is I don't view as a game deciding hacks at any means, but I think the most important to take out of it is that how it really unsettles That's +1 at this battle almost completely, to the point that he's in no mood to play it at all. And we're gonna talk about that a little bit at the end, why he wasn't in a greatest mood to play this battle to begin with. So I think emotionally it mattered a lot to That's +1, but I think in the battle in itself, it only meant that, yeah, the Butterfree wasn't able to get 1 or 2 hurricanes on the Duraludon, but I don't view as in the end game it would have necessarily changed anything. There will be something that could have changed that, as we're gonna be getting to the point that the Tyranitar comes in next, and it's actually a third focus sash from that's +1, and it's gonna be going for the Stealth Rocks versus the Duraludon, which is going to be able to finish it off with Body Press, bringing it down to the focus sash range, and then the T-Spikes picks up the Tyranitar. So all of a sudden, that's +1 only has 3 mons remaining, and he only has Stealth Rocks up on opposing side. So now that's +1 is a very last-ditch effort and a desperate moment as he goes into his Falinks, and he's going to be going for the no retreat, as Moit is going to be hard reacting on this and goes straight into his Marini with the haze, and he's going to be going for the haze, but before that goes off, the Zen head pop coming from the Falinks misses, and while this would have not killed the Marini by any means, it meant that there was a slight chance of that's +1 bringing this battle a little bit back for him and maybe try to go for a closer endgame that it probably would have gone otherwise if he doesn't get the chance to flinch. But when it misses, this meant that completely this was in a Moit's favor. And it just offsets that's +1 completely to even play this battle, and that was where that's +1 ran away from the battle, and that was the end of the game from there, and ended up at being the 5-4 win for Moit. So this, as a fan, was a really tough to watch. I took it in a wrong way for sure, and I comment on this battle from that's +1 side, and it was more so due to the fact as a fan and someone who would love to have the opportunity in WBE. I know I don't qualify for it by any means, where the state my channel is. But just as sake of just thinking that what kind of opportunity that would have been to play in WBE, it's rough to see that someone who gets the opportunity has this kind of week where he just completely throws it away, was in a completely negative mood, and doesn't seem to want to be there playing at that point of one. But I do understand that that's +1 also was really in a bad mood, knowing that how long it took for them to really get the battle going and connected, where he has other things to do than sitting in front of his screen and wait this one battle to be done. So in one ways I definitely understand his frustration, but at the same time I don't think even that frustration should justify it for him to do what he did. But I really hope this is just the low point of his season and this will not reoccur. And I can say now, without spoiling his next week, he was a lot better mood in his week 4 battle, in a lot better mindset of playing that battle. So kudos on him bouncing back that quickly already and being in the better side of things, and I really appreciate him doing that. But now, without covering this any further, let's just jump into the 7th battle of this week. And as the 7th battle for us to cover from this week will be between Sin City Seasouls, coached by Patty Trills, going up against another Seasouls team, being the Philadelphia Seasouls and coached by Jim Pact. So this was a battle while you can see on the result that it was a 6-0. It wasn't the cleanest way that it happened. There were a few things that really went into Jim Pact's favor to really pull it out a lot easier. There was one big mistake from Patty Trills that I don't think he needed to risk, and he got really punished for it, I guess in a very unfair reasoning as well, with his Incineroar. But this also was a very long battle, and Jim Pact tried to position his Sigilyph with the mono Psychic Stab. I believe it was Store Power that he ran on it, and then he had dual setup on it and Roost, which was one of his winning conditions once he got rid of the Incineroar as the game plan. And the secondary winning condition, he had a Subcalm Mindset Aura with Thunderbolt and Grass Knot. And throughout this battle, Jim Pact was basically trying to get one of them going completely and start snowballing from there. And some of the things that allowed the Sigilyph to become a really good winning condition was where Patty Trills to me made his one big misplay. Throughout this battle, Patty Trills, typically what I have seen, always tries to react to his opponent, what he's trying to do, and doesn't seem to have a clear idea what he wants to do in order to win. And you can kind of see from his plays back and forth that he didn't seem to have a good end goal what he was doing with his plays. He was kind of playing turn by turn, and then at some point he got really impatient to deal with the opposing Crocodile. So after he got his potting shot off with his Crown Seal Valley, he decides instead of going to Milotic, which was always the better and safer play, he goes into his Incineroar just to get it at -2 attack and potentially get a Will-O-Wisp off, where the Incineroar to me was always really critical to have in the back to deal with the Sigilyph off the chance it's a setup set, cause then Sigilyph can 1v1 the rest of the team if he wasn't careful enough. And unfortunately for Patichulz, he gets punished by this, cause after he take the first ground move being the Earthquake pretty decently, because the Crocodile was -2, the second one ends up critting him, meaning that he doesn't get his chance to pop his berry, which would have left him like 60 or 50% of health, so the Incineroar would have been decently healthy through the progress if he didn't get critted. But instead of that, he gets critted, Incineroar's dead, and all the seconds Sigilyph was kind of waiting to win the battle, even though it ended up didn't do that. Chimpact always had that winning condition in the back to rely on, and to me, that, while it was really unlucky for happen like it did, I don't think that play with Incineroar was no shape or form necessary for Patichulz to do. So that was something that I didn't like what he did during this battle. But then there were two things that really allowed Chimpact to have the unfair advantage with his Zeraora. Was one where he critted a Golurk from full while he was behind a substitute with the Zeraora going for a Grass Knot. The Golurk should have never died on a one hit from that Grass Knot coming from it, and it should have been able to get rid of the substitute at least and deter the Zeraora have a completely unfair advantage. But instead, Chimpact gets the crit and is able to do that, and before then he actually was able to fish off a Poison Jab Poison on a Jolteon that had Wish Protect and leftovers on it, and meaning that left the Jolteon in a position that it cannot really beat the Zeraora 1v1 anymore. It's gonna be slowly and surely been on a timer thanks to the regular poison, and this meant that the Zeraora at the very end was able to use that Jolteon as a winning or as a setup opportunity for his winning condition being that Zeraora, and then slowly and surely it's able to just snowball through the team, and we didn't get to really see the end game because at that point like Chimpact was already like this basically was end of the battle for Patichulz. So really tough battle for Patichulz. I don't think he really played again really how he should have with the critical mons that were crucial for him to help to win the game. But either way, I guess Chimpact played as he should have, so I'm not gonna punish him for all the luck he got, but Patichulz didn't make it any easier for himself with the Incineroar in itself. So that's gonna be the 7th battle of this week, and now let's go and see how the final battle went from this week. And as the final battle for us to cover from this week will be between Antarctic Aegislashes coached by Visually going up against Gergegumis coached by Fruit Berries, and this, to me if anything, was the battle of the screens everywhere on this battle if you watched it, cause both Clefable and Rotom Fan end up being dual screens, and the screens were up majority of the battle from either side at least for sure. So speaking of that, this turns out to be the scenario where turn 1 Visual leads up with his Light Clay Rotom Fan, which is a really good bring versus his opponent, and it happened to have Light Clay on it as well to get all of the full turns with it, as Fruit Berries lead off with his Xatu, and from there this helped Visually quite a bit because he was able to force the Xatu out hard and gets up a free screen on that turn as Fruit Berries swap into his Ditto to scout the Rotom Fan's full moveset, and then eventually we get to the point where Visual is able to get all of his screens up and then go for the Volt Switch as Fruit Berries tries to bring his Clefable in next. But luckily for Visually, that was the turn when he went for the Volt Switch, so he can immediately react on the Clefable no matter what set it would have been, and goes into his Diggersby in for free. This leads up into the scenario that the Xatu will have to come out yet again, like it was in turn 1, but now as a switching to the Diggersby, and from here, Xatu is actually able to go for the Trick Room as it took the knockoff from Diggersby and then get a slow teleport off into the Alola Marowak in the back, and this actually forced Visually make a minor mistake which he didn't have to do from my point of view, which while his Reflect was up, he still took unnecessary damage with his Diggersby and took the whole Flare Blitz from it and weakened his Diggersby around 30% of health from full, which wasn't any point of matter for me necessary for him to do, where he could have gone into his Primarina instead, and behind a Reflect he could have taken no damage from it, and he had a Rocky Helmet to provide even chip through there and completely shut down the Marowak from there. But luckily enough for visually, he still was able to manage the Marowak thanks to the recall that Marowak took. It actually died to the Rocky Helmet anyways from the Primarina, so while he lost a lot of health in his Diggersby, he was able to still get around the Marowak, and now it was coming down to that. Hopefully the Diggersby being weakened won't be something he has to regret on later on. But from here, the Fruit Berry is able to go into his Magnezone next. And from here, visually goes into the Rotom Fan, and he's able to get a lot of free turns because the Magnezone was locked into Flash Cannon, and this basically was unnecessary Fruit Berries to do because he gave so many opportunities now visually to get the screens up yet again, which proved to be such a problem as it is. So to me, I didn't understand why Fruit Berry was so like consistently clicking Flash Cannon at that point, and be happy about the situation where he was in from doing that, because this basically allowed visually to bring his Jirachi in, which was life for 4 attacks and had pretty good coverage, almost perfect versus his opponent's team. Unfortunately, it didn't have Flash Cannon for Clefable, but it was able to hit everything else super effectively, or really hard in general as it is. And from here, visually actually makes a little misplay with it, as it doesn't go for Aura Sphere versus the Magnezone after it was able to weaken a Ditto that was turned into Jirachi, which does come into play, I guess, a little bit later on. But the fact that Jirachi doesn't get the full value out of it because it didn't click the Aura Sphere, and that was where visually admitted that was too rush of a play for him to do. In the end, it turns out to be double down because Magnezone went for the Steel Beam, and both of the mons go down from there, and caused a situation where each coach had to decide to bring one of their mons out at the same time. And thankfully, visually, he got it right. He brought his Primarina in as Fruit Berries brought in his Haxorus. And this put Fruit Berries in a situation where he chooses to sack his Satu, and now visually is in a position that now he gets to see that the Clefable comes out, and he doesn't know yet that it's dual screen, so he's thinking the worst case scenario being a setup set. So probably he does hot swap into his Dragalsi and reacts on it, where the Clefable actually reveals to be the dual screens now and goes for the light screen first and then gets up the Reflect, and Dragalsi is able to 2-hit KO it from there. And only things that are remaining from Fruit Berry's side are the Haxorus from full and Ditto being below 20% of health, and this where Fruit Berries gets really desperate, but I think completely on the wrong time when he tries to set up versus the Dragalsi. But it turns out to be the case that Dragalsi is strong enough, even through a light clay, to OHKO the Haxorus from full, and then at the very end when the Ditto turns into Dragalsi, it's gonna reveal Fruit Berries that the Dragalsi had the Haban Berry on it, and it's able to kill the Ditto, and it gives visually a very solid 5-4 win. He didn't play it that, like, there were a couple of mistakes what I mentioned that he did, but I think his preparation was so good on this battle that it allowed him to do such a solid job this week. Fruit Berries didn't make too many mistakes unlike last week's, but this just happens to show that his preparation is not just up on the par to really give himself chance to win, and his draft is the same story as well. And this just happened to showcase when opponent brings a solid enough prep, they can completely shut down his draft, and this unfortunately has been the story of this season for Fruit Berries, so he has to take a very tough loss yet again. But now, as we have gone through all of the battles from this week, let's go and see very briefly how my power rankings will look after the week 3. And these are going to be my power rankings after the week 3 battles in the WBE Singles division, and the non-movements basically, and the ones that remain where they were, are the top 3 teams and the bottom 3 teams. As you can see, the closest one where I saw from those categories that we could have seen a little bit of movement was that I was considering moving the AC Slashes to number 2 because they had a little bit more or a lot more convincing win over the Gorgia Goomies, whereas the New York Trippies did not have as convincing win over the Bullet Punch Club thanks to the critical hit from the Sylveon into the Scolopid. But I decided to keep them as they were due to the fact that AC Slashes went up against the weakest team in my power rankings, but it's a very close between the number 2 and 3 at this point of time. But the really close battle is in the middle field, where you see yet again a lot of movement. The biggest winners thus far are the Detroit Steelwings, moving 3 slots at the number 5 currently, and Triple I People was able to move into the middle field now from number 13 into number 10 now, after having another pretty solid win this time around, even though it was due to the fact that Callum made a misclick. But I'm not gonna punish him for that when he had a very steady and up climb battle early on, and he was able to clutch it for himself. The biggest losers from this week are the Dundee dealers. Like I said, Callum is unfortunately gonna move 3 slots due to the fact that he really misplayed around that Conkelder, and the teams around is able to move up. So to me it was kind of a natural fate for Callum having to move down, and similar ways Uzi Connor has to move down. It wasn't due to his fault because he got really unlucky versus Joey, but because the teams around him were able to move up, and naturally he has to move down, even though it's not fully deserved for Uzi Connor's sake. So that is going to be my power rankings for the week 3. Let me know in the comment section which things you agreed on me and which things you didn't agree on, either on my power rankings or the recaps that I went through each battles in itself and what I had to say about them. But thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for the week 4 power rankings, which I will try to get a lot sooner than this one, once we get to see the final battle from the week 4 finally being uploaded. But until then, thank you all for watching, and I'm gonna be seeing you guys later.